Arizona needs to make a football coaching change. It's not going to be easy, but it needs to be done, and the Wildcats need to get this done sooner than later. What are the options, and how can they go about doing this?
You are Locked On Wildcats, your daily podcast on the Arizona Wildcats. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for keeping it Locked On Wildcats and making this your first listen of the day. I am your host, Mike Luke. All right. Arizona needs to make a football coaching change. Now, how did we get there? And then we're going to go backwards from there. I think the first thing that we need to talk about is Arizona at this stage. You know that Brent Brennan's not the guy. Now, I think there are some people out there. There is kind of a rule of thought that, well, guess what? It's just, it's first year. You don't really know exactly. You can just kind of find out later what's going on. That's not really the option, in my opinion. In the big world of college football, college athletics, you need to be able to know when you can make that move, and you have to be able to figure that out, because guess what? You're not going to be able to find out or get a fan base involved if Brent Brennan is back for another year. Now, you could say, well, he just needs to be able to get his own guys in here, just maybe get the offensive coordinator situation figured out. To me, it's really not that. To me, it's really much, much more difficult than that, because, this is a guy that went into this season that was, like he was given a really, really nice product, and he essentially destroyed it. He is not engaged with the fan base at all. He has essentially done nothing. Now, I think some of the people, they're like, well, you've just been really hard on him this whole time. Listen, I was okay with the Brent Brennan hire, and I was going to be the guy that was going to give him a chance, but there were way too many things way too early on that just led me to believe that he was not going to be ready for this time. And those things started, it was very early on. It was from saying that he was this is going to be a big part of this that this is going to be a big part, or he was going to be a huge part of this mattered to him. And then the next thing that he would talk about is that he would say, well, it's not really my job to engage with the community. That's somebody else's job. All kinds of different things that just basically made next to no sense for a guy that said that this was going to be his, that this was his dream job. Then all throughout camp, he was, well, what is your, what's your style of play going to be? There wasn't really much of that, and then he wanted to keep things really locked down. And he said the most important thing for him was to be able to protect the program. Well, that didn't make a ton of sense to me, because he essentially used that as an excuse to be able to lock things down and be able to keep fans out of practice. So the guy that said that he basically wanted to turn everything into, a situation where I want the fans to be involved. I want the fans to be able to be involved here. There really wasn't any of that involved with him. And I think that's the part that's incredibly frustrating with him. Now, you look at the next step with him, and what could that possibly be? This ship has sailed, because, like we've talked about before, you don't get better by losing a Tetaroa McMillan. You don't get better by losing a Jonas Savanea or a Tacario Davis. And make no mistake, those guys are gone after this season. They're going to go off to the NFL. They're going to make a lot of money, and it's just essentially this one's over. So losing those guys, you don't get better. You also didn't have a situation with this team where you knew that, all right, everything's going to be good. Everything's going to be good to go, because he's got this monster recruiting class. Now, again, he's got some good guys possibly coming in, but let's just say a Terry Shelton hits campus and he's a high 4-star kid. He's not going to be as good as T-Mac. If you lose Noah Fafita, the transfer portal, you bring in a freshman, he's not going to be as good. Brent Brennan hasn't done anything to really give anybody the vibes that he is the right man for this job. And the other thing too, the pressers are absolutely ridiculous at this point. Now, again, I get that he's limited in what he could really say, because it's also kind of he's in a different situation where he's in a different spot, because his team is just playing terribly. But every time you go out there and you essentially say the same thing over and over and over again, that, Well, guess what? We've got really good coaches. We got a good team. We just haven't been able to prove it. There's nothing about Brent Brennan that gives you the indication that he's going to be able to right this ship. Literally nothing. And every time you watch him in the pressers, you almost kind of wonder, how are you going into these press conferences not having a better idea of what you are going to say after these absolute destructions? Because again, with UCF, UCF is not a great football team. Neither was West Virginia. And UCF absolutely annihilated Arizona. They took their soul from them. And, these guys, I think, are essentially just counting down the days until they can get out of here. And honestly, can you really blame them for doing that? I can't. And I don't think that really anybody else can. And I think that's the part that is so frustrating. Is we talked all off season about how you wanted to be able to have a season that fans could build on, that the program could build on. Arizona's never really been able to string together back-to-back really, really good seasons. This was the year that I think you were hoping that was going to be the case, and that is just not going to be the case now. And I think that's what's incredibly frustrating about everything that we've seen from this coaching staff, from this team. And offensively, I just don't know how you inherit this kind of talent and then you have no idea what to do. So if you're going into a season and you have no idea really what to do, I can't really sit here and say that that you deserve a second year. Now, again, we're going to talk about some of the possibilities, but it's been an utter disaster from with the product on the field, which is obviously the biggest part, to talking with to basically shutting people out from the media, from having next to no fan engagement. He's just in over his head. I'm sure he's a nice guy, but he is in over his head. And sometimes you just know it when you see it. Sometimes you can just watch a guy on the sideline and be like, all right, or watch him in a presser and be like, this feels like somebody that should be more like kind of the gym teacher, or he should be at a much smaller school. He shouldn't be at the University of Arizona. Again, I'm not saying that Arizona's Alabama, but you also know at this stage in the game that Arizona is kind of in a spot where it's going to be somewhat difficult, I think, for the Wildcats to be able to get a really good situation in here. And I think that's what's he took a good situation and he really took it down. Not only did he take it down, he made it incredibly difficult now to look at this roster and say that, for the next 2 or 3 seasons, Arizona is going to be in good spot. That just doesn't feel like that's going to be the case. And I think that's the part that's very frustrating about this, is that there isn't really a light at the end of the tunnel. And if you're Arizona, I think you got to be pretty upset about that. And if you're Desiree Reed-Francois, you've got to be looking at it and saying that, okay, I can't really go into another off season here with this guy as my coach, because absolutely nobody's going to show up to these games. And when I say nobody's going to show up to these games, I mean nobody is going to show up to these games, because you haven't given them a reason. From a fan perspective, you haven't given that. And from an on the field perspective, you haven't given that. And I think that's the part that's been the most disappointing about all of this, is that it just has been kind of amateur across the board. And so we're going to talk about what are some of the options here in just a second. But before we get into that, let's talk a little bit about something else. Okay, ROY. All right, here's the deal with ROY. This is really, really good stuff, and everybody should be involved in this. Check it out. So far this season at ROY, we pulled over $10,000 to support players on ROY. Micro deposits lead to massive change. With the ROY app, you can direct your support to the athletes you love, ensuring that all funds go to the specific player you choose. Unlike collectives, you know exactly where the support is going, and you even get exclusive content. Now, here's the deal. Download ROY now and join the NIL game with no subscriptions and no fees. And be sure to check out us on Instagram, Facebook, and X at ROY_run return on you for more info. Again, ROY is taking over, and it gives the fans an opportunity to be able to really take part in what they want to be able to do. Create an account on the ROY app to win. And again, you can win 2 free tickets, watch your favorite NCAA football team, donate to the field, all kinds of good stuff at ROY. Also now, FanDuel as well. With FanDuel.com, listen, That's where this is the place that it's at this point. With FanDuel.com, you know that your money's good. You can put down $5 on an NFL game, and guess what? You get $200 in free plays. It's that simple. It's that easy. The NFL is here at this stage, and everybody's a big fan of what's going on. And FanDuel is here. You can bet before games, you can bet during games, or heck, you can bet you can bet futures. And again, that your money is going to be good. Check it out at FanDuel.com. All kinds of really, really good stuff. And I think the part that too about it is that with FanDuel, that again, your money is good. The NFL is here, college football is here, college basketball is here, the NBA is here. Check it out, FanDuel.com. And you put down $5, you get $200 in free plays. Thanks for keeping it locked on Wildcats and making this your first listen of the day. I am your host, Mike Luke. Okay, now what can Arizona do here? You got to be able to figure out something if you're DRF. Now you got to be able to get rid of Brennan. Now I know that you got the buyout that's essentially $14 million. I think that there's certain things that you could maybe do. And I think with the buyout, the first thing that you need to be able to do is you go to somebody like a Humberto Lopez or whoever the case may be. And that person, if he pays that buyout, he's going to want to have some real veto power over that future decision making of that. And quite frankly, he should be able to have that. If he's going to be asked to do that, he needs to be able to have some of that, because again, if you're going to come to me again with asking for all kinds of money, that's something that I'd want. But because here's the thing, that Arizona is going to be bad next year. Not only are they going to be bad, you're not going to have anybody that is going to be intrigued by the Arizona product. And a big reason why is because of the product that has been put out in the field and about how bad it has been. And you've got a milquetoast coach that I don't think anybody has looked at and said that's a good product. And so, it's terrible to have to take out that loss, but you also know this isn't the guy. And I'm sorry, I don't think at this stage bringing in a different offensive coordinator is it. This has just been malfeasance at the highest order. And not only has it been malfeasance at the highest order, this has been somebody that, I think he has let down. He's let down the team. He's let down let down players. He's let down the community, because this is not something. Maybe he's a great guy. He could be a great guy, but that doesn't mean that he's the right guy for this. He inherited a great situation, and he has not been able to take advantage of that. So you've got to be able to get him out of there, because next year it's not going to be any better. You're just going to hemorrhage money. And think about it from this perspective. If it's next year and you win 2 or 3 games, is Arizona in a better shape at that point? I don't think so. As a matter of fact, I think that you're even in a worse stage, because then the malaise really starts to set in for Arizona football. So you got to be able to figure that one out. And again, that's not going to be the easiest thing for DRF, because, she's here, but I think it also makes it a little bit easier, because you also do know that at this stage in the game that you've got a decision that you've got to be able to make. And if you can make that decision and, get through there, then maybe you don't have the, you don't maybe get the biggest coach in the world, but we're going to talk about some of those. And I think you need to go after a guy like Rich Rod. I know how weird it sounds, Rich Rod throwing some of the tantrums on the field. I get all of that. But the thing about it with Rich Rod was that you knew that you were good for about 7 or 8 wins, and it was going to be wildly entertaining in the process. And I think that's something that you got to be able to, if you're Arizona, you want to be able to have. You want to be able to have a product where that it's going to be an exciting product to be able to have on the field, and it's going to be competitive. Here's the thing with Brent Brennan, none of the thing is competitive, and I think that is the issue. So I would look for a guy like a Rich Rod. Now, some people might go for a younger type player. I get all that. Or a younger type coach, if you get all that, I understand. But at the same time, that person is probably going to move on after a couple of years, Jed Fish style. And you might say, well, heck, Mike, that's not the worst thing in the world. And you're right. But I think somebody like Rich Rod coming back, I think that he would energize the community in a weird way. He's obviously a really good X's and O's coach. And listen, if we're going to lose, if we're going to go down, let's go down with style. And I think somebody like Rich Rod would be exciting. You hear somebody like a Rhett Lashley as well. What could that be? But, somebody, you're not going to get, you're not going to get Kirby Smart in here, or you're not going to get the OC at Alabama anymore. That's just not the case. When you're in the Big 12, you don't have those kind of funds. So that's something that you've got to be able to keep in mind. You don't have those type of funds, and that's going to be an issue for you if you're Arizona. But somebody like a Rich Rod, I think, would take that job. And not only would he take that job, I think he would do well. Again, I'm totally cool with that. I think we've got to be realistic at this stage at what Arizona is. And if you can get 7 to 8 wins and you can be competitive, and then every fifth season, I think that makes a ton. I think that makes a ton of sense. Now, Rich Rod was far from perfect, but if you're at the University of Arizona, you're not going to get a perfect coach. That's just not the way it is. At Arizona, you're going to get a guy that is going to have some flaws, and not only is he going to have some flaws, he's probably going to be in the spot where it's like, all right, well, you might need, there's some issues there. But, as far as, the allegations against Rich Rod, all those were thrown out. I don't care about that. Yes, he had an affair with this, an extramarital affair. I get all of that. But again, it's college football coach. He's also it's not really hurting anybody. That's between him and his wife. So they can figure all of that out. But overall, that's the kind of guy that I would go with. I don't want somebody like Chip Kelly or somebody where the game is clearly passed him by. I don't think the game has passed Rich Rod by, quite frankly. I think Rich Rod is actually, if you look at it, I think he's still the same dude. Now, listen, you would need to tell him that he needs to focus more on recruiting and what's your expectations for Arizona. And we're going to get to that in just a second. But first, ZBiotics. Okay, here's the deal. ZBiotics, check it out. With ZBiotics, this is all right. It is sweeping the nation. Here's the deal. Go to ZBiotics /Locked On College to learn more and get 15% off your first order when you use Locked On College at checkout. ZBiotics is back with 100% money back guarantee. So if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. Remember to head to zbiotics.com /Locked On College and use code Locked On College at checkout for 15% off. Again, have you, like I said, here's the great thing about it. Drink some of the pre-alcohol. For best results, make pre-alcohol your first drink of the night. Pace yourself, hydrate, and have a good night's sleep. Wake up feeling refreshed and ready. ZBiotics. Again, ZBiotics is their first pre-alcohol probiotic drink, is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. Again, check it out, ZBiotics. A lot of people are using it. A lot of people that are very smart are using it. Check it out. Thanks for keeping it locked on Wildcats and making this your first listen of the day. I am your host, Mike Luke. All right, now we need to talk about what proper expectations for at the University of Arizona should be. I think that it's listen, like I said, and that's why I keep going back to Rich Rod. And I know it sounds silly. I know some people think of it as a joke. That's fine. But if you can win 7 to 8 games, be fun, be competitive, that to me is much more attainable than what we've seen. Listen, with Kevin Sumlin, he was a disaster. Obviously, you know what you're going to get with Rich Rod. And here's the other thing too. What should expectations be at Arizona? You're not going to be competing for national championships here. The chance to really be able to compete at a high level and maybe get where kids grow up thinking that Arizona's good. That was this year. This was the year to be able to try to get that second straight season in where you were really good, and that just didn't happen. And not only did it not happen, it was an utter disaster. You've got to be able to get somebody in here that's going to put butts in the seats. People want to be entertained. If you're going to lose, make it entertaining, or have a grinder. Have somebody that is out in the community. I mean, look up the street at ASU with Kenny Dillingham. That dude is out in the community. That guy is out there making, he is out there. He wants everything that, everything that he can get. He wants to be able to get. He's going to be firmly involved with the local coaches. He is going to leave no stone unturned. Whereas with Brent Brennan, you don't really know. I don't think you really know what, you do know a guy that just is in kind of over his head. But the biggest thing for me is that you've got to make this move somehow, some way. And I know it's easy for me to say. I'm not the one with all the money. I get all that, but you've also know that we're past the point where we know that this guy is we know that this guy isn't the right guy. And like I said, it's been a disastrous situation. I understood the hire at first because you looked at his track record at San Jose State. It was okay. He was able to keep all the players in, but throwing good money after bad is just incredibly difficult. Also, the fans too that believe that you should just wholeheartedly support the coach no matter what, and that you shouldn't question, those people are incredibly detrimental to Arizona football and to what you want to do, because they don't have any expectations. All they want to do is just to be able to say, I support the coach, I do this, I do that, and quite frankly, that's just not good enough. And so that kind of just, pie in the sky, everything's great. That's what leads to low expectations. That's what leads to coaches that stick around. So you can't go with those type of ideas. But the biggest thing that we know too is, well, I don't know that this team's quit. I think you can look around and you can also kind of see that this team also kind of knows that this dude's really not the guy when you're talking about Brent Brennan. And honestly, he's not the guy. I mean, again, I'm not breaking any news here. You can watch him for 5 minutes and be like, all right, that's just not the dude that should be the coach at the University of Arizona. He should go back to, he should coach at, wherever, but it just shouldn't be at the U of A. It has been, like I said, this has just been a disastrous situation for Arizona all the way around. And watching him, you just know that he is in well over his head. And I think if you're DRF, listen, I mean, you come from the SEC. Your job obviously was to come here and clean up the financial situation. This is obviously not something you probably wanted to deal with day one, but unfortunately, you're also getting paid a lot of money. This guy's getting paid a lot of money, and you're going to have to deal with it day one, because sometimes coaches just come in and immediately they're not the person. I mean, look at Ben Lindsay. You knew that Ben Lindsay, after 1 year, you could tell that Ben Lindsay was in well over his head. And this is going to be something that, he was not going to be the coach. You end up with Lute Olson. Now, again, the odds are next to zero that you're going to end up with a coach like Lute Olson to replace Brent Brennan. But that's not the guy. You also know that this is just somebody that has just kind of stubbed his toe from day one. And again, the things off the field are still odd to me, about how he's more concerned about curtains over the weight rooms. The strength and conditioning staff here is not good. You could talk with parents from players, and they'll say that, last year with Tio, that it was heavy lifting. It was heavy, it was things like that. This year, it's far more plyometrics. It's far more just kind of, conditioned based. And if you're not, which I guess is okay if you're not going to scheme. But the problem is that these guys, Brent Brennan, and that was one of Rich Rod's problems. And again, Rich Rod was far from perfect, but this Brent Brennan is certainly not going to be somebody that I think is going to out scheme anybody with talent like the way Rich Rod did. And so there's that. Now, with one thing, though, that we do have to, I think it's very important. We're going to talk about this tomorrow during the post game for Arizona basketball. You got to keep Tommy Lloyd happy at all costs. After watching Brent Brennan, we know what bad coaching looks like. We know what somebody that is just in over his head looks like. Arizona basketball. We got a gem in Tommy Lloyd. Now, I know that there's some people that are a little upset that, he hasn't gotten past the Sweet 16. I get all that. But at the same time, you got an absolute gem in a coach that wants to be here and has Arizona as a top 10 program, as a top 10 entity. So there's that. But, like I said, it's I was cool with Brent Brennan initially, but then very, very quickly, very quickly, I think that it was apparent that he wasn't going to be the guy, and it was a ton of different things off the field and then on the field. In his press conferences, he just didn't give you any indication that this was the guy that was ready for the job. And it's unfortunate, but you got to move on. You got to be able to move on because he's been a train wreck, and this is not somebody that should be coaching Power Four football, let alone be entrusted in the kind of situations where in the kind of situations that he is right now, where he's got high profile talent. And that's where I feel that Arizona has let these kids down. Brent Brennan has let these kids down because he clearly wasn't ready for this opportunity. And it's been somewhat of a joke. And that's where you just feel for the kids and you feel for the community that is invested in this, that has watched it, because Brennan's choked this one away, and it's not going to get better. You watch him and you're like, all right, this dude just doesn't get it. I don't know, give a big shout out to Dwayne Aquina. I think Alonzo Carter's a pretty good coach as well. But other than that, man, other than that, Oglesby, not good. Some of the other coaches, not good as well. This is a problem. Bobby Wade hasn't been very good at all either. So there is that. But we got Arizona basketball. We got something much, much better that we can get to that we'll be talking about. But then we're going to get back to Arizona football as well. But either way, Brent Brennan needs to go. Rich Rod, then, DRF. It's going to be a tough decision for her, but I think it's one she's got to make. But on that note, as always, very much appreciate you all making Locked On Wildcats your first listen of the day. I'm your host, Mike Luke. Bear down and back the A.